our kitchen. Freezing the food scraps also starts to optimize and prepare these scraps for being composted. Optimizing is anything you do to make the food decompose easier, which will help the worms to process it faster. Right now, everything is frozen in one block. So what I'm going to do is dump it and then break it up with a shovel. So there you have it. I've watched that video a lot, and it mostly makes sense to me. It's clear, but I just wanted to ask if there's anything that's unclear or that you would like me to elaborate on concerning container gardening or Heirloom, who provides some of our produce, or composting.
I have a question, Chris. I've read that sometimes when you want worms in the compost, you want to avoid high concentrations of vitamin C to take care of the pH. So people don't used to throw like orange peels or lemon or things like those. Do you add those things, and have you noticed a change in your compost?
I do put citrus. You know, we go through a lot of limes. I just try to moderate how much citrus I put in there, because I find if I overload it, they take a very long time to break down. Or I've noticed sometimes like the worm population will go down. But I'm not particularly careful about, you know, some people won't put garlic, some people won't put onions or broccoli, like things from the Brassica family. But I put almost everything in there, save animal proteins.
Yeah, I've seen that, Mr. Nacho, all the oranges that are used in the elementary cafeteria for the orange juice go to that compost, and he still has worms there. So I wanted to ask you that as well, because I've seen that.
You know, they're sensitive little creatures, but at the same time, when you have hundreds or even thousands of them in there, there's power in numbers, I guess.
Yeah.
Where did you get your worms? Can you order them online right now?
To start with, Mr. Nacho generously gave me some, but then I supplemented my culture with I found worms on Mercado Libre, and I got in touch with a guy on WhatsApp, and 3 hours later he was at my door with worms. So
do you have his WhatsApp?
I do still. Yeah, I can share it with you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Chris, what do you do when you vacation or you guys are out of town? Do they just live till you get, I mean, do you feed them a lot when they live, or?
Yeah, they're fine. So this large basket of produce that we get every week, it's changed how we eat. We used to eat more processed food and cook less, and now we cook a lot more and eat a lot less processed food. So we have a lot of organic scraps. And so the worms are always fighting to keep up. I could stop for probably 2 months stop, putting new input and come back, and there'd be super rich humus or compost, and probably still some residual cardboard and scraps. The cardboard is the bedding, and they're actually perfectly fine just with bedding. So, if that was a concern, I could just put like 3 or 4 layers of cardboard on the top of it,
And
damp cardboard, and then just keep it in the shade. And it's never been an issue because we always go home for like 3 weeks in the summer,
right.
and they're fine.
Chris, I have a question. I got some worms from Alicia, and she gave me a fair amount, like a yogurt-sized container worth. And she's like, I feed them every 2 weeks. I'm like, okay, sounds good. I think I fed what she gave me also had some food in it, so I was like, I think these will be fine. And I waited a week, and I had some scraps, and then I went up to feed them, and they're in their own container, and I don't see them anymore. And like the soil doesn't seem like rich humus or anything. It just looks like the soil that I put in. And the scraps are there, and they look decomposed, but they're not like eaten up. So I don't know what happened to them.
Maybe
I
two
think I
things.
killed them.
I have 2 theories. They went subterranean and they're hiding out, or something went out of balance, like there wasn't enough air and too much moisture, and they passed away and decomposed themselves.
I mean, it's dry as hell in there, so that's why I actually thought, I was like, maybe it's too dry.
Well, they're like 90% water themselves, worms. So you have to find this sweet spot where it's not too wet, because if it's too wet, they'll basically drown in ammonia. And it can't be too dry because they'll just dehydrate.
So do you add water to it? Like, do you water your compost, and do you leave it a little open? How do you do it? You don't close the lid completely, then or you make holes?
Yeah,
I don't know, I have a lot of questions. Yes.
It's okay. It's a little ecosystem. So there has to be oxygen, there has to be water, there has to be carbon, and there has to be nitrogen. And so it's just a balance. And so all the water that I need to add comes from the food scraps itself. And when you're composting in a plastic container, plastic doesn't breathe. So you're always trying to keep things from getting too wet. So in the video you saw our kids like pizza, so we used to order pizza once a week, so we always have cardboard boxes from the pizza, and I just rip those up, and they absorb a lot of that excess moisture from the food that goes in. And then, typically, and then with all the other accumulated compost and humus that's in there, that's like a moisture sink. It holds a lot of moisture. But more often than not, the challenge is to not let it get too wet. I used to compost, I had the system I built wooden boxes. And this time of the year, it was really hard to keep it moist enough because they just breathe so much, and it's so dry and so hot this time of the year.
And how do you scoop it out of the box when you want to use it as fertilizer and not bring in the worms with it? Like, how do you remove the compost that's already made?
Chopsticks. So worms don't like sunlight because it'll kill them. So I put the bin out in direct sunlight, and they go down, and I scrape the air out. I scrape away a layer until I see them again, and then I wait 15 minutes, they go further down, and I scrape away a layer. But
okay.
You'll end up getting some of the worms, you'll get some of their eggs, but then you put that into your container, or you put it into your, directly in plants that are in the ground, and then you start little worm cultures in your containers, which is a good thing. So.
And this seems like a really basic question, but so what do you do with what is the point of compost compared to just soil that you would buy from a nursery?
Worm castings are, people who garden, they call worm castings black gold. It's more nutrient dense than any other compost. It has all these kind of magical properties. I haven't read about them in a while, but they build soil fertility. The worm's guts impart the compost with bacterias that are very strong and beneficial and will fight off the bacteria that you don't want in your substrate, your soil that you're growing in. So it's just a really remarkable compost.
Mix it in with the soil, or you like put it on to fill out the top when it's like settled in, or how
Yeah,
do
I
you
usually
use
just like top feed the containers. I'll just put a layer of it on top and that's fine. Or, you know, and like use a little cultivator and just work it into the soil. Other people will take, all our containers have holes in the bottom. So sometimes I'll just run water through them and then that dissolves the humus and it makes a tea. And then it's like liquid fertilizer. And that stuff is just as nutrient packed and nutrient potent for your plants as the compost, the humus itself. Mary, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. I heard you say sometimes it takes them a couple months to eat everything that you put in there. So if you want to use the soil or the fertilizer, do you need to wait a few weeks and not add any new food? Like what? Because if you're adding food every week, then
Right.
it's half food, right? So do you wait a month or two when you decide you want to use it, or how does that work?
Yeah, it really depends on how much organic waste you're producing, the size of the container you're composting in, and how many worms you have. And so we have 3 bins, and I feed one bin 1 week, the next, and then the next, the third. And so it's this cycle. And by 3 weeks later, when I get back to that first bin, and I'll just feed on half of the bin, I'll put the food scraps on just 1/2. And so 3 weeks later, when I come to that bin, I put the food scraps on the other side of the bin. And then that other side is pretty well processed. And then 3 weeks later, I'll feed the opposite side of
You're
that
so
bin.
organized, Chris. Oh my gosh.
I screwed it up so many times. I've
I
had
feel like I'll be a worm killer if I do it. I'll come and
It's like 6 weeks essentially that they have to eat the food and to make the usable fertilizer.
it all depends on quantity because the figure I hear thrown around is that a worm will process twice its weight of organic scraps a day.
Oh, wow.
So if you have a big population of worms and maybe you're just a family of 2 or you're single and maybe you're a moderate vegetable eater, you know, and if you're feeding on a weekly basis, they might just go right through it and you'll have hummus every week that you could. I don't take that compost out every week. I do it very infrequently. You know, it's usually when we have a container and the tomatoes are finished and I need to I can't think of the word, you know, the soil's depleted, so I need to refresh the soil. That's when I'll go harvest some of the compost and put it into the containers.
Sorry, I have one more question. Is there a specific reason you freeze it, or just so it doesn't rot in your kitchen?
Yeah, so it doesn't rot in the kitchen. And then also, you know how frozen vegetables, when you take them out of the freezer, they're really squishy and gross? Or frozen fruit, you know, you take a beautiful strawberry and you freeze it and it comes out and it's really soggy and mushy. That, you know, you've frozen the fruit, which breaks all the water expands and breaks all the cells, the cellular structure, so you get mushy fruit. And that's already started the process of decomposition. If you take that mushy frozen strawberry and you're to put a fresh one, put both of them in the compost system, the bacteria will start to break down that mushy frozen strawberry faster. And it's the bacteria on the food scraps that the worms eat. The worms aren't actually eating the food. They're eating the little bacteria that are responsible for decomposition.
And could you like put your daily scraps there? I mean, if I live by myself and I don't have that much leftovers, could you put them daily directly without putting them in the fridge first, and like a way of disposing them there, or what would happen? Nothing?
Yeah, no, you can. For sure. You know, and some people just keep they've got some sort of vessel, little container in their kitchen on the counter, and every few days they empty it or something. So it's not obligatory to freeze them or to take that extra step. Ours is a little, like our process is a little time intensive or labor intensive. But I've got a 9-year-old and that's his chore, so it helps.
Oh, I don't know if I missed this or not. Like, are you just starting with just regular bags of soil, or any particular special type of earth or dirt, or?
No, I mean, to start a system from scratch, you need worms and you need bedding. And bedding is anything rich in carbon. So shredded paper, cardboard, cocoa coir. A lot of people use that as bedding to start, which is just shredded coconut husks. Worms love that. You actually don't need any earth or soil, tierra, to get a bin going. And, you know, looking ahead to whenever we're back on campus, I'd be more than willing to do the hands-on workshop again. Hopefully we won't have to wait a whole year, but maybe, I don't know. Yeah, we could figure something out. Because, you know, the investment is pretty minimal to nothing. If you already, you know, have a plastic bin or 2 plastic bins, ideally, you can make a system in, you know, under an hour. And then, you know, it's just some trial and error. I've definitely, you know, experience is the best teacher. And, you know, there's only been one worm genocide in our home where I let them all completely dry out and die. And that was, you know, that was in my first year of trying to figure this out. And I haven't really had a worm mentor. It's just been the internet and books. And it really would have accelerated the learning to just do it with someone. And I'm a big believer. I'm kind of a compost geek. And there's no organic waste that goes into our garbage on a weekly basis. And there's just, you know, our industrial agricultural system is responsible for a lot of, you know, the climate change that we're facing these days and food waste. And so I think it's a relatively small action that many people could take on with a minimal investment of time and effort.
After you've done the bedding with what you said with cardboard and these coconut shells and all that, but I guess you cannot put the worms right on top of that, right? You have to wait some time or add some soil, or when do you add the worms?
Worms are hunting for bacteria right away. So the idea is, you know, take your cardboard, get it moist because they need moisture, and then let that start to break down for a few days or a week. Because the cardboard, you know, it's made of wood, it'll start to decompose. And once that even, you know, a little bit of a bacteria culture starts to thrive there, you could put the worms in and they'd be perfectly content with just that.
Without soil, huh?
No, they don't need, soil should not be in the mix. It's not a variable. And a lot of commercial potting soil is loaded with petrochemical fertilizer, and that'll kill the worms. And people make that mistake commonly.
Yeah, because you sort of think that they need the soil, you know?
Yeah, well, these worms, I forget the Latin name, but they're red wigglers. And if you went out into a forest and found some decomposing leaves and scraped it back, that's where you'll find them. They're on the surface of the soil. They don't burrow into the soil. They're not earthworms. They're a completely different species of, I don't know, type of worms.
Okay.
So they don't need soil at all. They need bacteria. They need bacteria, moisture, and shade, essentially.
I have 2 questions. There's no way that you're gonna end with too many worms, right?
Nah, the more the better.
No, but I mean, like coming out of the box and
Yeah, they're not gonna like over reproduce or something.
No, and worms have a lifespan. I don't know how long they live, but it's relatively short, you know. So they reproduce like crazy. If your system is in balance, you'll see lots of these little yellow bolitas in their eggs, and you know, as they die off, they're replacing themselves. I haven't found that problem, and you know, I have 3 different bins, and for some reason, one of the bins is the happiest. You know, it has the most worms. It's out of control. And then the other two are so-so. I don't know if the worms are
And
more
when
high in those types of bins because they're taller bins and the other one's wider. It has more surface area. That's probably the reason.
and when you say to start with 2 bins, why is that? You
So
say like it's better to have 2 bins.
you stack the bins and the bin, so they should be 2 of the same bins. And the bin that's on top has a bunch of holes in the bottom.
Ah,
Because
okay.
so it can drain.
Okay.
And then, so the bin that does not have holes in the bottom, that acts like a catch. And it catches all the excess moisture. So you put a brick or something in that one. So the second bin sits on top of the brick and there's a little space between the two. Because what you want, and Lumata can help me with this, in a healthy compost system, you want aerobic decomposition, meaning that it's oxygen rich, versus anaerobic decomposition, which means it's decomposition where there's a lack of air and it
Creates alcohol.
creates alcohol and ammonia and things that will kill your worms, and it smells really foul. It smells like rotting meat or something. So 2 bins so you can drain, so the extra moisture is always draining.
And you always put like not cook food, right? Like it's not like I can just like put the rice that I just cook.
Yeah, I mean, you know, sometimes beets go bad in the refrigerator or whatever, and so cooked beets, for example, I just put some of those in the compost.
Yeah, but it's not like you can put like spaghettis or.
Sure.
All right.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I
I
thought it
mean,
was
things
only
that
like
have been fried a little
vegetables
bit.
or stuff like that.
Is there like a worm composting support WhatsApp group?
If there isn't, I nominate you to start it.
Is it for the worms to talk to each other though? I like that idea more.
Yeah, like the pets one. This will be
Owner, my owner isn't feeding us.
I think there is like a question in the chat, I think.
And I'd like to see that too.
Should we go on a field trip?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yay.
So we're very lucky in this quarantine that we have a small garden where we can, all the laundry is hanging up. Our bed sheets. So those are 2 bins.
I don't think your Wi-Fi is reaching you. Okay, there it is.
Is it working okay? And so it rained yesterday. So Wi-Fi connectivity. Hold on a second. This is the bottom bin, and there's some like PVC pipes that act as little spacers. I'll go grab the other one, hang on.
Hi, chicken. Hi, chicken.
And then, oh, this is what it looks like on the inside. I don't know how well you can see. Kind of gross looking, but I don't know if you can see. You guys applauding. Come on. I hope that helped. Give them a picture of what it looks like.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chris. That was really interesting.
Thanks, Chris.
Welcome. It's cool to see everybody. Thanks for your interest. And like I said, further down the road, hopefully, a time and space is presented where we could actually make bins together and adopt worms. And
Wait, did you look at the chat about the sourdough?
no,
Everybody on the chat wants to buy your sourdough, but I'll outbid anyone.
You watch yourself, Nova. You watch yourself.
It's so good. Come on, Chris.
I'm baking today.
Ah.
You could have a business, Chris, really. You really could make some side cash.
I'll pay for delivery and gas.
You're so simmer down.
Here's the thing with baking. I have a friend who's a baker in Madison, and it's an economy of scales. He has to bake hundreds and hundreds of loaves of bread to make any money at it. And
I bet. And you wouldn't love it anymore if you were doing it to sell.
probably not.
Damn, it's good.
Okay, I'm gonna sign off, everybody.
All
Thanks.
right.
Bye.
Oh,
Thank
you
you.
should
Thank
do a
you.
class on that, Chris.
Sorry?
You should do a sourdough class. You could do it for our Wednesday meeting. Tell Martman.
Just to let you know, start to finish, it takes like 36 hours.
Yeah.
Never mind. You're a scientist. I can't do these things.
We'll just have
Thank
to.
you, Chris.
Yep, you're welcome.
Gracias.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.